If you're someone who likes to make decisions based on real information, not headlines or hype, you're in the right place. Hey everyone, it's Robin Price with your Dallas real estate market update for November 2025. So these are the neighborhoods that I'm focusing on, and these are the market indicators that I'll dive into. And by the way, today's last section is all about average sale price by neighborhood, which I know are the numbers that everyone wants to hear. So stick with me because that's coming up at the end, and that's one of the most interesting stories in the market right now. So let's start with what's happening with inventory and supply, because that kind of sets the stage for everything else. In November, Dallas had 4.3 months of supply of single-family homes. That's down just a little from 4.7 months in October, and honestly, that's exactly what we expect this time of year. Seasonally, fewer homes come to the market around the holidays, so supply dips slightly. Compared to last year, supply was basically unchanged. And here's the important part. Inventory has been hovering in that range that feels balanced. It's not a clear seller's market, but it's also not tipping in the favor of buyers either. So think of it as a market where reasonable offers and well-prepared homes tend to win. Now let's break this down by neighborhood, because the differences across Dallas really tell an interesting story. And remember, average sale price is coming up at the end. Oak Lawn had the highest supply in the city at 8.6 months. Now that's down from October, but still much higher than most other areas. What's interesting is that even with that much inventory, prices in Oak Lawn increased significantly this year, and I'll explain why when we get to the average sale price section. Oak Cliff had 5 months of supply, down slightly from October and almost identical to last year. Pricing here wasn't as resilient in some other areas, but it also didn't fall dramatically. In Northwest Dallas, supply dropped seasonally from 5.3 to 4.7 months, and this area had about 9% more homes for sale than last year. Prices in Northwest Dallas stayed surprisingly steady despite that. And speaking of Northwest Dallas, if you haven't seen my new listing that I brought to the market in that area, it's an income-producing 4-unit property near Walnut Hill and Marsh. You can find details on the properties page of my website. North Dallas came in at 4.5 months of supply, down from 5.2 months in October, but also up 18% year over year. Prices in North Dallas climbed steadily throughout 2025. In East Dallas, supply dropped slightly month over month and year over year, ending November at 3.9 months. Far North Dallas had 3.3 months, down both from last month and last year. And lastly, Lake Highlands followed the typical seasonal trend with a slight decrease from October to November and about 10% more inventory year over year. So before we move on, here's something really interesting that stood out when looking at supply across these neighborhoods. So the areas with higher price points and higher levels of inventory, places like North Dallas, Northwest Dallas, and Oak Lawn, are actually the ones that saw some of the strongest price appreciation this year. Now I know that sounds counterintuitive. People tend to assume that higher supply puts downward pressure on price. But in these neighborhoods, buyer demand stayed strong enough that prices continued to rise, and in Oak Lawn's case, they rose significantly. I'll break down those appreciation numbers when we get to the average sale price section, so stay with me because that part of the story is really quite compelling. In November, the average Dallas home was on the market for 60 days before going under contract. Now that's up from 55 days in October and up from 46 days last November, but again, this is normal for the season. Homes typically take the longest to sell in November, December, and January, and then speed up again when spring market kicks in February. So if you're planning to sell early in 2026, this is something to keep in mind. Longer days on market doesn't mean the market's weak. It just means that buyers are less active around the holidays. Serious and motivated buyers are still out there. So there were 464 closed sales in Dallas in November. That's down from October and down from November 2024, but once again, this is completely normal for this time of year. So our sales normally drop from October to November, then they hold steady from November to December, they dip again in January, and then they start to rise in February. So in other words, The market has normalized, and that's actually a good thing. Let's break down sales by Dallas neighborhood. In East Dallas, sales were down 18% year over year. Oak Cliff, they were down 13%. Far North Dallas, a whopping 32%, and Lake Highlands, 31%. North Dallas sales were down 11%. Oak Lawn was about the same as last year. North Dallas was the only market where sales were up 13% year over year. So this is definitely one to keep an eye on as we move into 2026. So now for the part that everyone wants to hear. Despite higher supply, longer days on market, and fewer sales, prices in Dallas continue to rise. The average sale price in Dallas proper reached $720,000, which is nearly 6% higher than last year. That's right in line with our historical norms of 3 to 5% annual appreciation, and in some areas, appreciation exceeded that. Here's how it breaks down by neighborhood. In North Dallas, the average sale price was up 12% year over year. Northwest Dallas was up 4%. Oak Lawn, 31%. East Dallas, 6%. Far North Dallas, more moderate at 3%. Lake Highlands, the average sale price was unchanged. And in Oak Cliff, it was down about 4%. So even with very different supply levels, most neighborhoods experienced steady or strong appreciation, and some, like Oak Lawn, saw dramatic increases. So here's something I want buyers who are sitting on the sidelines to hear. I know a lot of people are waiting for prices to fall, but the data simply isn't showing that. Even in neighborhoods with more inventory, prices continue to rise because demand remains steady, and the most desirable homes are still selling quickly. So waiting for a big price correction may actually mean missing out on ongoing appreciation, especially as the market remains balanced and we head into the spring of 2026. So here are your key takeaways for November of 2025. Number one, the Dallas market is balanced and behaving normally again. Number two, homes are taking longer to sell, but that's actually seasonal and normal. Number three, closed sales are down, which is completely expected for this time of year. Number four, and most importantly, prices continue to rise, even in neighborhoods with higher inventory. So in closing, if you're making real estate plans for 2026 and want to talk about how these trends relate to your goals, please reach out. And if you found this video helpful, please give it a like or subscribe for next month's update, and drop a comment or a question below, especially if there's a neighborhood you'd like me to break down in more detail next time. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next Dallas Real Estate Market Update. Happy holidays.